Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our viewers from around the world. Rabbi Friedman, just want to make sure that you can hear me.
I hear you well.
Good. So again, welcome to the series In Conversation. And tonight we have a very special guest from the United States of America. It is our honor and our privilege to welcome Rabbi Friedman here this evening or this afternoon or this morning from wherever you are watching this broadcast, Facebook Live session by the Center for Jewish Life. Just a few words about Rabbi Friedman for people who don't know him, most do. Rabbi Friedman was born in Prague, lived most of his life in Minnesota, sent there by the Lubavitcher Rebbe as his emissary. He currently resides in New York. He's also been blessed with a family, 14 children, I believe, all of whom continue to inspire and teach Jewish people around the world. He's an acclaimed author, a social philosopher, and an international public speaker, spoken around the world, including here in the UK, in many parts of the UK, including, I believe, Oxford University. He is also the Dean of the Bet Hana Institute of Jewish Studies for Jewish Women, and also the acclaimed author of the book, Doesn't Anyone Blush Anymore? I believe Rabbi Friedman had a close relationship, personal relationship with Bob Dylan, who also spoke very highly of the book. We thank you very much for Rabbi Friedman for joining us. It is our privilege, it is our honor, and we hope you are safe, we hope you are well, where you currently reside in Brooklyn, New York. So first of all, an opening question on a more macro level. This pandemic has engulfed the entire world. The impact, as we all know, every one of us knows this, feels this on a daily basis, is huge, perhaps even unprecedented in terms of the global nature of this impact. And our question to you is, our opening question is, what does the Torah say about pandemics? And how should we as Jews respond? And if I can just point that question and ask you, what does God want from us? Rabbi Friedman.
To second guess God is always a risky thing. To speak in his name and put words in his mouth is always a little dangerous. But what response has traditionally been the Jewish one, recommended by our sages and so on? There are a few things that we need to take into consideration. Firstly, that nothing happens by chance. Nothing happens by accident. And nothing happens by plague. We have to really be careful about this. For example, we get very upset when we hear another person died from the plague. But if he died from something else, oh, okay, that's not so bad. This thinking has got to be avoided and rejected. Every death is horrible, every death is tragic, and the cause of death, whatever the doctors write on the paper, is really quite irrelevant. Nobody is dying because there is a plague going around. It's not the plague. It's a divine plan. No one will die unless it is right for them to die. Don't get into that mood or into that thinking that the plague is out of control and it's taking lives. The plague has no will of its own. It has no thoughts of its own. And it certainly has no authority of its own. So panicking is definitely the wrong response. In fact, the panic itself could be as dangerous as the disease. So it needs to be avoided completely. Another thing we need to look at is what in the moral sphere, what is this plague doing? Anything that causes people to deteriorate morally is a terrible and ungodly disaster. When something causes people to improve morally, then there's a definite, at least a silver lining, but there's definitely a positive dimension to what's going on. Like in the story of Purim, when the threat of genocide hung over the Jewish people, they became much better morally, which told us that this is going to end well. So wherever you see moral improvement, you know that this is moving in a good direction. So the tragedies are certainly real and as tragic as any other tragedy, but evil is not showing, it is not present. We're seeing goodness, a lot of goodness. And we're told that in the end of days, all concealment will be removed. Everything will be out in the open. So what we need to expect is that all evil that had been hiding will be unmasked, and all good that we hadn't noticed will be revealed. So goodness will come from places we didn't expect, and bad behavior will come from places we did not expect. So things are becoming clarified, things are becoming open. And what we need to do is make sure that whatever is going on, it causes us to become better. That's how we measure whether the world is good or bad. Not by how healthy it is or how happy it is, but by how moral it is. We need to keep our eye on that. Wherever morality is improving, there's going to be good results. We're moving in a good direction. So people who are now stuck at home with their families, there's a major improvement that is both necessary and welcome. People at first, if you remember, it seems like so long ago, when we were told to be quarantined to our homes, people panicked. How are we going to survive being home with our kids? How are we going to survive being home with each other? We never get along that well. To be locked up in the house 24 hours for weeks and who knows how long, this is going to be a disaster. In fact, the officials were all predicting that domestic violence is going to radically increase and get out of control. That has not happened as far as we know. The opposite has happened. People who did not get along very well suddenly saw each other in a different light. They started to look good to each other. Spending all this time with our children has turned out to be the pleasure of life for the children and for the parents. So a lot of sobering goodness. Can you imagine what kind of a life were we living when the thought of spending time with your children was horrifying, when the thought of being alone together with your spouse was terrifying? There was something seriously wrong with our lifestyle. And this has vastly improved, and it will remain. We're not going to slip back to the old habits after this. So we need to focus on the moral issues, the moral temperature of the universe, of the world, to see whether we are making progress or slipping back. So we should look forward to a much better world when this thing is over. I think that's pretty much the sum of what God wants. But I got to tell you this little story. Many years ago on Sukkot in Crown Heights, it was raining heavily, and it just wouldn't stop. And Chassidim, of course, wanted to eat in the sukkah, and they would eat in the sukkah if it was just a normal rain. So you get a little wet, nicht gefährlich, but this rain was really impossible. So they waited and they waited for the rain to stop or at least slow down, and it wouldn't. So somebody said to the Rebbe, what does God want? Why won't he let us eat in the sukkah? And the Rebbe said, what does God want? That you should go into the house where it's dry and warm and comfortable and enjoy a Yom Tov meal. That's what God wants. What does God want of us today? He wants us to be home, enjoy our children, and for those people who are alone, enjoy being alone. That's what God wants. And it's so good for most people.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So let's, if we can, zoom in a little to into some of the things, the points that you mentioned. You know, you're known, you've spent a lot of time, many years, as a social philosopher, speaking about relationships of all types. So there are many types of relationships. We talk about spouses, we talk about parents, children. So for some people, and there's a range in the audience, for some people it's parents, older parents who don't have the opportunity to spend time with their children, at least in physical proximity. And certainly festivals like Passover, which we are in the middle of celebrating, where it is always about family. We don't have that opportunity today, and that's a challenge. It's a change. It's difficult for many people. So parents cannot spend that time with their children in the way that they have traditionally done. Children can't be with their parents. Obviously that's a challenge. It's not something we would choose. It is not something we would want, and that is painful in a way. The question is, what if you can be a bit specific, what are the benefits? What are the upsides in that relationship? How does that relationship between parents and children who cannot spend the time together when they normally would, what are the benefits during these extraordinary times, during this lockdown?
What's obvious that immediately comes to mind is that we can't take things for granted. Yes, we made our seders by inviting our parents or going to our parents' home, or just in general, dropping in to see our elderly parents when we have them. And that just became routine. Anytime you break a routine, it forces you to rethink, to re-examine. So what's happening today is that we realize that we miss being with them. Or to put it in stronger terms, we yearn to be with them. And we haven't yearned in a long time. We have everything so comfortable and so organized and so routine or taken for granted that we don't yearn. So people who are truly saddened by the fact that they can't be with their parents, they are rethinking their relationship. They're discovering feelings that they ignored or didn't know they had. It is deepening our connection. So sometimes being away brings us much closer. You can imagine in the olden days, well, not that long ago, before there was internet and before there was this ability to travel, parents and children separated in different countries, other sides of the ocean, what connection did they have? They were not going to see each other. They weren't going to fly over there and make a visit. That wasn't possible. So the only thing they had was letters. writing a letter, a brivele de mamen. And those letters were, if people would save them, if people would read them today, it would show a depth of feeling that we're not even familiar with, because we have it so comfortable and so easy. So what's happening is our appreciation, our understanding, our connection, our need for each other is becoming refreshed. It's becoming clear and obvious. And what we yearn for, by the way, is such an important and fundamental part of who we are. You know, when a person passes away, his soul comes to heaven, and they ask 3 preliminary questions of the soul. Did you raise a family? Were you honest in business? And did you yearn for the coming of Mashiach? Now, the first 2 questions make sense. What was your life? You have a family, you have a business, you were good? Basic. Did you yearn? Well, why is that significant? They yearned for Mashiach. Mashiach didn't come. So what is the yearning worth? It turns out that if you want to know a person really, internally, essentially, don't ask whether he has a family. Everybody has a family. Don't ask whether he was good at business or honest in business. Everybody has a business and everybody tries to be honest. You want to know what this person is? Look at what he yearned for. What you yearn for is an expression of your essence, because nothing influences that from the outside. This is you. This is where you live. You live in the areas that you yearn for. So discovering that we actually yearn to see each other, and we yearn for a better world. This is very significant. And our lives had become so routine that we forgot what we yearn for. So that is at least one aspect of the silver lining of the separation.
Let's move to the other end. We spoke about that distancing where family members were normally used to being together. What about at the other polar end, where parents are being forced now to spend a lot of time, weeks, many weeks in some countries, with their children in lockdown? And the parents are, anxious. There's a lot of uncertainty, if it's jobs or the future or, lack of schooling currently. So children and parents are being forced to live in close proximity together. And that could cause a lot of tension in the family dynamic. What do you see could be the sources of tension, and what suggestions would you have as to how to not just alleviate those tensions, but to use these moments as an opportunity to improve the relationships we have with our children?
Well, I would suggest the first thing is not call it lockdown. That sounds very much like prison. Again, there's a story. The National Women's Organization, or the Chabad Women, were having a convention in Detroit. And it was the middle of the winter. And when the convention was over on a Sunday afternoon, everyone made their way to the airport to fly home. But the airport was closed because of a storm. So they sent a message to the Rebbe saying that they're stuck in Detroit. What should they do? And the Rebbe's answer was, stuck in Detroit? God needs you there for a few more hours because you haven't finished or completed your mission. You're not stuck, you're employed. You're on a mission. So it depends on how we look at this quarantine. You're stuck with your children. This is not going to be a positive experience. You have time to be with your children. That's a much more positive framing of the issue. So let's begin with a positive attitude. We always thought, I'd love to spend more time with my kids, but it never happened. So God says, I will give you this gift. You say you want to spend more time with your kids. Here's a bunch of time. Spend it with your kids. You say you want to spend more time with your spouse. You feel like you've been neglecting each other. You both work. You're busy. You're distracted. This relationship is just on automatic pilot. Not good. So God says, all right, here's an opportunity to make it good. We also are learning what life is made of. It's very sad, but true. We have become comfortable with the idea that life consists of traveling, visiting, nightclubs, entertainment, shopping, sports events. And of course, work. That's what life is. Now we're discovering none of that is essential to life. The home, that is real life. So now I think when kids go back to school eventually, it's going to feel so different. They will have a completely different appreciation and expectation of what school is supposed to be. Schools will become much better educationally. Going back to work, it's going to have to be a whole different attitude. The world is bankrupt as far as for all practical purposes. So how are we going to make money? It's going to have to be cooperative. We're going to have to help each other. Countries are going to have to help each other. Businesses are going to have to help each other. It's going to be a very different feeling, a very different purpose to everything we do. And now traveling and nightclubs and entertainment, it's going to have to improve too, because we realize what's real, what's superficial, what's necessary, what's unnecessary, completely different world. So when God says, I'm putting you into your home and I don't want you to leave, which is what God is saying, it's not lockdown, it's family time. A lot of family time. How could that not be good?
Yes, certainly words are very important to communicate ideas, and the way you put it, it certainly changes the dynamic. The Rebbe used this on many occasions, especially what is well known is referring to hospitals as in Israel as Bet Cholim, houses for sick people. He encouraged strongly that they actually rename it to Bet Refuah, the house of healing. So yes, words are extremely important in communication and changing people's attitudes towards handling challenging times. We can just move on to one other area, which obviously is affecting life and Jewish life in the sense of the community centers, specifically the synagogues, the Bet Knesset, Bet Tfilah, Bet Knesset, where for hundreds of years, thousands of years, these were places where people, individuals came together and created community, identity, solidarity, empathy, and also at the same time praying to God. And that was the house of worship, that was the place they came to, that gave them tremendous inspiration and strength to deal with the challenges in their lives, And then all of a sudden, almost unprecedentedly throughout history, these houses of worship are closed. They've been closed for a couple of weeks, 2, 3, 4 weeks in some cases. That surely, how do you explain that? What's the opportunity there?
Well, first of all, it's an opportunity for the rabbis of these synagogues, of these shuls, to rethink their role. They've gotten too complacent, and what goes on in the synagogue has become too routine. It's going to have to liven up a little bit and take on more meaning. But here's the really important thing. Is Judaism a communal religion or a private religion? Is it about groups of people, or is it about the individual? The synagogue has become way too prominent in Jewish life, as if all Judaism happens in the synagogue. And once you step out of the synagogue, you're not being Jewish anymore. The truth is, of course, is the opposite. I was talking to a guy who had just finished studying a mimer, a Hasidic discourse. Very profound, very deep concepts about soul and God. So he tells me which discourse he had studied, how much he enjoyed it. So I said, okay, good. Now you're going to be a better husband. He said, no, this discourse had nothing to do with marriage. If you're not a better husband, then you've accomplished nothing. Studying Hasidus, studying Torah, any part of Torah, is supposed to make you better. Better at what? Better how? What's better? The first place your self-improvement will show is in your marriage. Because after you finish studying, you're going to go home. Well, have you become better? The reason men are obligated to go to the synagogue twice a day for 3 prayers every single day is because that's how they prepare and are inspired to be better husbands when they come home. So this is a strong reminder. The synagogue enhances family life. It's not a life of its own. And the same should be true with a career. A career is not another life that you live. And in many instances, the career and the family become competitors. You got to choose between them. You come home after a day's work, you don't want to hear about family problems. You've had your day. You've lived your life. Now you just want to be left alone. You haven't lived your life. A career is not life. A career is a way of maintaining your existence in this world. It just pays the bills. Now you got to get a life. So we should stop calling it making a living. That's almost a Yiddishist expression, a Yiddishism. You go to work to make a living. No, you go to work to be able to feed your family. You still haven't gotten a living. So now we're learning and we're feeling and we're seeing and we're understanding. The synagogue was never meant to be the center of life. It's one of 613 mitzvahs. And it's meant to make you a better husband. Now, you have all the time in the world to be a better husband.
Yeah, that was very well put, very counterintuitive. And I guess most of real Judaism, genuine Judaism, is perhaps counterintuitive.
Well, you see, it also comes out in the season of Pesach. Pesach is the best example of where we see that nobody makes a Seder in the synagogue. You make a Seder at home with your family, and you invite your extended family to get together. So it's a mitzvah holiday. It's a family mitzvah, a family holiday, more than, for example, Shavuos. It's really home-centered. So that's why it's happening in this season.
So in other words, I guess just to summarize, this is an opportunity, these extraordinary times in which we find ourselves, to focus more on the ends than on the means, even if those means are religious. If I can ask you one more question on that subject, and that is prayer. Okay, prayer is about an intimate connection with God. Normally, we found that prayer, we would do it, and we were encouraged to do this in a certain place, a synagogue, which had a certain holiness, also together with other people, 10 people, at least, hundreds would be better. Do you see any, again, benefits and opportunities in this area, prayer, in our prayer and getting closer to God, when we are no longer able to do this communally and in houses of worship?
If we can connect it to the story of the Exodus coming out of Mitzrayim, we were told before we left to make a Seder and to have the Paschal lamb and the matzah and the maror. And we were told to put a sign on our doorposts that identified the home as a Jewish home. And people, of course, will ask, why does God need a sign on the door to identify a Jewish home? That seems a little strange. If we are his children, if we are his chosen people, doesn't he know where we live? We have to put a sign on the door. So I think one of the ways of understanding that properly is God said to each family, make a Seder in your home. Stay in your home. Don't go out. The sacrifice is for the family. No stranger may join you unless they sign up for it in advance. And put a sign on your door. What it means is, of course, we are God's people. Of course, we are God's children. But sometimes we are treated as a collective. The Jewish people. God said, when it comes to Pesach, each person mark your door as an individual. Because this is going to be not only a collective exodus, liberation, it's going to be a personal liberation. As God says, I will come to your door to take you out of Egypt. It's not, let's all gather in a square or in the synagogue. No, stay in your home and I will come to you and take you out of Egypt. So what's happening is that the focus on the individuality of the preciousness of every individual as an individual is being highlighted. It's amazing that if you stay home and say the same prayers that you would say in shul, it is just as pleasing to God today as it would be in normal times when you say that in the synagogue. There are some things you cannot say at home because without a minyan, you can't say Kaddish and you can't say Kedusha because those things are so holy that they need a minyan. You got to have 10 souls before you can do something so holy. And now when you're home, you're not going to be able to do that. What is God telling us? You don't need that. The times that we're in is special times. In normal times, you need that whole extra additional holiness that can only come when you have a minyan. Today, we don't need that. God is saying, I just want to hear from you privately as an individual, as a family member, your prayer in your home, your way, even if it's not perfect. like so many people had to make their own Seder, and they really don't know how to make a Seder. They never did before. They have no experience. They were always at a rabbi's Seder or Zadie's Seder. Now they were forced to make their own Seder. And God is saying, I know you're going to make mistakes. You're going to put this before that, and you're going to dip this into the wrong thing, and you're going to, yeah. And God says, that's fine. That's fine. I just want to hear you make a Seder to the best of your ability, because we all know we're not perfect, which is perfectly okay. God is asking us to do perfect things in our own imperfect fashion. So the preciousness of the individual and the compliment where God is saying today, after all these years of exile and after all these years of heroic behavior on the part of Jewish people, I don't need heroics anymore. Now I just need one little mitzvah, privately, sincerely, wholeheartedly. Do it at home. So it's a huge compliment. God is telling us, it's just you that I'm interested in. I don't need crowds. I mean, if you're aware of the fact that in New York, not so long ago, there was a great assembly. 90,000 Jews got together in a stadium. 90,000 Jews in a stadium because they had completed the study of the Shas, of the Talmud. Pretty impressive. A huge gift that the Jewish people gave God. A very powerful statement of our devotion to the Torah. 90,000 Jews completed the study of the entire Talmud. Now God says, that was great. Let's go to the opposite extreme. Not 90,000, not 10,000, not 10. Just you. You in your home, doing the best you can do in your own clumsy way, in your own inexperienced way. I love it. That's what I live for, God is saying. That's what I need. I just need you as an individual to join me in my holiday. That's progress. And we should take it as a huge compliment.
As you were speaking, you sort of tend to think, and I think that those polar ends, the community, the power of the community on the one hand, but at the same time, the power of the unique individual in their own simple, sincere way, came together in talks around this time of the year by Yakel Pekudei. The Rebbe would speak about those two parashiyot coming together, Yakel celebrating the power of the community on the one hand, but at the same time, let us not forget the power of that individual, because in a way, it's more unique and special in its own way. Let's move on to a more macro level, let's say in the historical context. So we talk about the beginning of time, Exodus, Passover, the birth of our nation. And now we are 3,332, I believe, years later. We as Jews, one of the 13 principles of faith is we believe in messianic times and a utopian time. We believe the world is getting better and better, and one day we will enter that age, that messianic age. Do you see this event, which is unprecedented in ways? It's global, it's huge, leadership is lost, at a loss as to what to do. Do you see this as an important moment in the transition towards a utopia, if I may say, a more utopian age?
Isn't everything? Doesn't everything lead to the conclusion? So certainly something as dramatic as this, it's definitely moving us forward in the progress and the coming of Mashiach. But let's try this. What kind of a world is it going to be after Mashiach comes? What are we supposed to expect or imagine? So here's one very practical way, realistic way of looking at it. In the world today, without Mashiach, in other words, the imperfect world, there's this strange and objectionable condition where the fact and the truth are not the same. They're both real, but they're different realities. So, for example, Jews don't eat pork. True?
Yes.
Is that a fact? See, the fact is that there are some Jews who eat pork. So the fact does not match the truth.
Are you going to be a long time?
Most people, human beings, are basically good. True? Yeah, it's true, but it is not the fact. Fact is people are terrible. We are meant to be healthy and to live meaningful lives. True? Yes. Fact? No. This is the most disturbing part of Golus. We know what's true, and yet we look at the fact and it doesn't match. The Holy Land of Israel belongs to the people of Israel. True? Yes. Fact? Nobody agrees. It's such a strange world. When the fact does match the truth, we call it a miracle. Like the splitting of the sea, which we're going to celebrate in a few days. What happened at the splitting of the sea? The Egyptians are chasing the Jews. They've got an ocean in front of them. They've got these huge cliffs on both sides, to the right and to the left. They're stuck. They're locked in. And they're crying to God, what should we do? And God says, aren't you on your way to Mount Sinai? Yes. Well, then go. You got to get to Mount Sinai. And the people said, but there's an ocean in the way. And God said, you do what you need to do. You got to get to Mount Sinai. So they went towards Mount Sinai, and the sea got out of the way. So what actually happened? The fact of the sea surrendered to the truth of Torah. Jews have to receive the Torah. The ocean is there. Why can't it be someplace else? So this is the difference between fact and truth. Fact is reality as it happens to be. Truth is the reality as it must be. So there's only one way to resolve this. The fact that is not necessary has to surrender to the truth that is absolutely necessary. Coming of Mashiach simply means all fact will also be the truth, and every truth will become the fact. This division, this split, this friction between what ought to be and what is in fact, this has got to stop. So every human being, I believe, has standards, ideals that they truly believe in and plan to get around to it soon. My ideals, my picture of what I should be is much higher, much more noble than what I in fact am. So I'm not living up to my own moral standards. I'm not living up to my own ideals. The coming of Mashiach means if it's true, why isn't it a fact? The facts will merge with the truth, and what is right and what is true, what is the purpose for our existence, will become the everyday fact of life. That would be a very, very good world. And it's so doable. It's so doable. It's not overly ambitious. It's not otherworldly. Our own truths. So what's going to happen when Mashiach comes? Human beings are basically moral and good people. In truth. Well, they're going to become good and moral people in fact. Jews don't eat pork in principle, in truth. Well, the fact will become that no Jew will eat pork. Jews don't work on Shabbos. That's true. It also needs to be a fact. So that's what Mashiach is. Mashiach means a world that has healed this rift, this gaping wound that separates truth from fact and fact from truth. That makes sense.
There was a great baseball player in America called Yogi Berra, who coined many phrases which have become memorable. And one of them, I believe, is, in theory, there's no difference between theory and fact. But in fact, there is. What I want to ask...
Welcome to a Yankee fan here.
What I want to ask you is, you know, in the real world, in the factual world, the world in which most of us operate, there's a lot of discord. There's a lot of, we say, machlokes, division, divisiveness. There's a lot of hate. There's a lot of negative energy that Jews, unfortunately, for a long, long time, have felt towards, unfortunately, towards each other. There hasn't been that unity which was achieved in certain moments in history. In fact, Rashi, in that famous verse, when the Jewish people come to Mount Sinai, says this was a unique moment in history where the Jews actually were united like one man with one heart. So my question to you is, how do we get over that? Because certainly this must be precede the times of the Mashiach. We have to deserve the coming of the Mashiach. As the Rebbe said, not only sit passively, but to be proactive in actually each and every one of us ushering in that age through change, through personal change, through personal transformative change. And certainly this coming together, this unity, is a central part of that. My question to you is, how do you see an event like this, which has certainly shaken up the world? It has shocked the world to its core on a macro level and on a micro level too. How do you see this helping the Jewish people coming together?
Hasidus teaches that in order to reconcile differences, in order to bring about unity, where there are such great differences, valid differences between people and groups of people, the only way to really bring them together is to introduce a third, higher interest that unites them. The example of the lieutenant and the captain, who are different ranks, different opinions, different egos, and of course they will have different opinions. But when the king walks into the room, the lieutenant is no longer a lieutenant and the captain is no longer a captain. They are both equally subjects of the king, and that unites them. It dissolves their difference because in the presence of a greater force or a greater want, the petty wants of each individual dissolves. So the way that we get together is not by losing our opinion or losing our individuality. We will remain individuals and we will remain opinionated, and both opinions could be right, both opinions could be good. But when you introduce God's opinion, God's want, then we cooperate totally, and our differences don't get in the way at all, because there's something so much more powerful that neutralizes our differences and brings us together in a common cause. If we wake up in the morning, and this is, I think, the ultimate prediction of life in the future. If we wake up in the morning and we realize a simple reality, a simple truth, I don't need to be alive. I don't need this. I never asked for it. Life is not necessary for me. If I was never born, I was never created, I would not complain. You never hear a complaint of somebody who wasn't created. They never come knocking on your door and complaining, how come I wasn't born or created? We don't need it. The Gemara told us this thousands of years ago. You don't need to be born. If I don't need to be born, then I certainly don't need to get a job. If I don't need to get a job, I certainly don't have to pay bills. So all the assumptions that we've had, that we are very needy because we must live, and in order to live, we must do all sorts of things, that assumption is starting to fade. Farmers get up early in the morning, all of history, to milk the cow, plow the fields. Why? Well, you have to. Why do I have to? Well, how else are you going to live? Today, people are thinking, and why do I have to live? This is not depressed people or suicidal people. This is just people who are thinking. The threat of dying is no longer enough to make life meaningful. We can't live your life so that you don't die. It's circular reasoning. So what's happening, and hopefully this is going to increase the speed with which it's happening, we're waking up to the idea that I don't need this. I actually don't have any needs at all. Every kid is telling their parents, I don't have to clean up my room. I didn't ask to be born. I didn't ask to be born. That is so true. What took us so long to figure this out? I didn't ask to be born means I have no needs. I have to go to school. I don't have to go to school. I have to get a job. I don't have to get a job. I have to buy a house. No, I don't have to anything. I'm a creation. Isn't that amazing? Only the Creator has to. Only the Creator is essential. So anything that is imperative can only come from Him. I have no imperatives because I am not imperative except to Him, to the Creator. So imagine if everybody wakes up tomorrow morning with the recognition that I don't need anything. I don't need to be born. I don't need to be alive. Well, then why am I? Because instead of being needy, you are needed. This is the future. This is how it's all going to become good again. I will realize that instead of me being needy, It's the creator that is needy. You don't create a universe unless you need something. How is it possible for the creator to be needy? I don't know. It's an interesting conversation, but there's no question that that's true. God created the world because something has to happen. Not a whim. It's imperative. So Torah is imperative. Mitzvahs are imperative. God's purpose is imperative. The world must become what God created it to be. So that is the truth. That will prevail, and we will realize that we've been living under a false assumption. I need? No, I am needed. I am essential to him.
Which in a way is the most empowering thought, that you're actually needed in a world where there are 7 other billion people. I think it was Mark Twain who once said that the 2 most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why.
You mean, give me a second, I'm needed here. Yes. My date of birth is August 27, 1946. 11, I have a New York address and a Minnesota address. 55116 in Minnesota. Yeah, right, 55116. Absolutely. Yep, thank you. Okay, I'm back.
Okay, Rabbi Friedman, I was just saying it's a good job you didn't give over your social security number, because we're on Facebook Live.
Right.
And certainly not your New York address either. I was saying to summarize what you said, Mark Twain once said the 2 most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. It's not what we need, it's what we're needed for, which resonates very deeply with us, and it's when you really start to live. So we're coming close to the end of our session here. If the Rebbe was always into the practical application of all these theories, as to echo the words you use, to transform the theory into the fact, to make the truth become more real in the factual world. So what is the practical takeaway to an audience, a wide range, who are living in these in these challenging times? What's the practical takeaway as to what they can do, or the focus in their lives day to day, as to fulfilling their purpose, to doing what the world needs of them or God needs of them, and not to focus so much on their selfish instincts or narrow interests? What's the theme?
Well, the beauty of mitzvahs, every mitzvah, is something we could live without. We don't need for human purposes. It is purely a service of the Creator. So ask a guy to put on tefillin, and he says very honestly, thanks, I don't need that. I say, I know you don't need that. That's what makes it a mitzvah. If you needed it, that would be your need, and I would leave it to you to take care of. No, you don't need to put on tefillin, but God needs you to put on tefillin. No, you don't need to keep kosher. God needs you to keep kosher. In fact, you don't need to honor your parents, unless you want to be in the will. You don't need to honor your parents. God needs you to honor your parents. It's one of the 10 commandments. So every mitzvah you do is something beyond your own need. You are serving God. So if we want to improve the world, and serve God at the same time. Think of the mitzvah you're not yet doing. The mitzvah you think you're going to get around to soon. Now is the time to get around to it. So add a mitzvah to your daily activity. Put a coin on the pushka every day. Put on tefillin every day. Keep kosher. Make Shabbos more holy. Light Shabbos candles. Whatever mitzvah you can think of that you're not committed to, now is the time to make the commitment. And then study Torah. You have time. Go online. There are so many good classes, lectures, fascinating, interesting. Chabad.org. You can study any subject your heart desires. Set a time and make it real. For an hour every day, you're going to study Torah. You can do it as a family. You can do it as an individual. You can do it as a couple. That will enhance your life immensely. And no, you don't need it, but that is what is needed of you. So it's a pleasure to do because it's not your need. And to be needed is really the ultimate blessing. We need to be needed far more than we need to be loved. That's simply a human fact. We need to be needed. We need to know that we are indispensable. And we can be indispensable only to the Creator. So let's refresh our relationship with Him, take on another mitzvah, study a little more Torah. It's magnificent.
Rabbi Friedman, thank you very much for those very refreshing, encouraging, optimistic words and message that you've shared with so many people. We thank you all. I take this opportunity to wish you, your wife, and all your wonderful family, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and the entire community of Crown Heights where you currently reside, and all the Jewish people and all mankind wherever they are. Please God, God should have mercy on us. Pesach, as we know, doesn't just mean Passover, it also means mercy. He should have mercy and compassion upon us and heal the world. And please God, as we all wish for the coming of that messianic age, truly speedily in our times.
Can I say something personal, Rabbi?
Yes.
My siblings, we were sitting around and reminiscing about our childhood, and we remembered that there were these Malava Malkas that were organized for the children in the yeshiva building back in Brooklyn. And one of the most popular presenters at this Malava Malka, which we all remember fondly, was your father, who would come and tell us stories from Talks and Tales and from the Talmud. So please extend really hearty wishes for good health and long life to your father, who was an amazing man, and I'm sure you're very proud of him. And tell him that we've been thinking about him.
I certainly will. He should be online if he managed to connect. I certainly will do that. And may we share only good news between each other and between all mankind. Thank you very much again. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.